Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Merrill, today with Goodspeed and Merrill, and we have joining us Karl Frank from the Expert Network Team, A&I Wealth Management, and Jeff Krommendyk from OneDigital Insurance.
The dumb ones in the room, ready to ask the easy questions.
Yeah.
Fist pump.
Yes,
Fist pump.
I'm on you. Yep.
So we had to take a brief
What?
fist bump.
Why?
But it does impact us, so we better get smart soon.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Continuing our discussion, we had to take a brief mental break from our prior discussion with Charleston DeGrood Chase
Hey, Chase.
from Goodspeed and Merrill. He's our resident expert on the Corporate Transparency Act, and that's what we were talking about in our last podcast. And lest you think we covered everything that was worthy of concern or understanding, we have some additional material to cover. So we're going to recap a little bit the corporate, what was the
Company applicants.
company applicants. We're going to talk a little bit about how one complies, the filing process, which probably outside of the PII and using the internet issues is probably the least onerous aspect, or at least burdensome, unless you have 50 entities. And then some risk management considerations, I think, and then whatever else comes to mind for
Putting
folks.
it in perspective, just making it real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go with the recap or expansion of your discussion on the
Company applicants.
company applicants. So many new words. I wish they had acronyms for it, you know?
Well, that would just make it worse.
CTA is bad enough. Company Corporate Transparency?
Corporate Transparency Act.
Corporate Transparency Act.
One could say it's a little on the opaque side rather than transparent.
Yeah. The opposite of what it says it is.
Imagine that.
We're here to help.
The Financial Responsibility Act of Congress. Anyway.
Okay, yeah, let's go into the company applicants. So alongside the beneficial owners, and which are, just to recap, those who own or control at least 25% of a company or have substantial control, which the substantial control we went into in the last episode.
Officers.
Yeah, officers, anybody who has appointment or removal authority, either over an officer or a majority of directors, and
The catch-all. What was that catch-all?
any other form of substantial control. So anybody who has substantial control is also anybody who has any other form of substantial control, which makes perfect sense.
Real quick clarification on that. Nonprofits are exempt? This is to bring in board members.
Correct.
Yeah.
Nonprofits are exempt. I asked you, were you able to confirm if HOAs were in that category or not yet?
I wasn't able to confirm that, no.
Yeah. I believe they're tax exempt in the way they're certainly state level nonprofit, but I can't remember.
What about directors of a church?
Well, that's a
Director-
nonprofit.
They're a nonprofit, and then there's another level of nonprofit exemptions for entities that only exist to assist or provide funding for a nonprofit entity. So there can be like
Foundations.
that's what I
family
would,
foundations.
yeah. So there's two levels to that 501c3 conversation.
Do they actually call it out by 501c3? Because that's
Yes.
important. Okay, because there's a bunch of 501cs
Mhm.
that, fraternal organizations, churches, all that sort of stuff. So churches are right. So churches definitely fall under the 501c3. I just don't remember
Yeah.
if.
Oh no, it is. Oh, excuse me. It is 501c, not 501c3.
Okay, so it would cover all the fraternal organizations. Probably covers nonprofits.
And trusts
I
under
mean,
49
HOAs.
trusts,
Those are
political organizations.
the 409 trusts are your or 401. Is it 401 or 409?
It's gonna be
That's
Trusts
your
are-
401ks and defined benefit plans, things like that.
they're saying 4947A, 527E1, 501C.
527. Yeah, those are all like statute, like IRS tax exempt kind of
Mhm.
So
structures.
they're all free.
They're all clear.
No problems with them.
No, but that's not.
Can still volunteer for Rotary.
Yes,
Good. Can still help out the church.
correct.
Could be a partner or a director of my trade association, for the Financial Planning Association.
If they're 501c3 exempt, yes.
501c something, but not a C.
Oh, you're talking like for your
Yeah,
what's
industrial financial planning association.
financial plan,
Or-
FPA? Yep.
The mining association,
Sure.
or the gold miners, or the.
Again, not giving legal advice through this podcast,
Not
but
NAFA. Insurance,
generally-
insurance people.
Yeah,
yeah, hypothetically, yes.
Teamsters.
That's you. I think of you when
I
I
mean-
think of Teamster.
There's probably some wandering going on with the Teamsters.
Oh no, they're good.
They'll be okay?
They're
They
totally.
should be subject to this Transparency Act.
Oh my
Well,
goodness.
they have other financial disclosures, but like you say, if it's not an active 501c organization, if it's underneath or just providing financing, then it is
Well, that could
different
be,
scrutiny.
I think that could be, the exemption is an, quote, entity assisting a tax exempt entity. So it can be an LLC or a corporation, but it would, if it's if it operates exclusively to provide financial assistance to or hold governance rights over any tax exempt entity over
That's
the
good.
above. So
I don't even know what they're getting at there.
So there's a
Yeah.
rule. Yeah.
weirdness.
All right, sorry. This
No,
it's so mind blowing.
So
It's
those are the
easy
people
to
that-
like get off on a
Right.
tangent. So
Well, it's so all encompassing. Any exemptions are actually really important to understand.
which is why I would suggest that if you have any confusion about whether you're exempt or not, check with an appropriate advisor to help you navigate that.
Right.
Because we don't know how they're going to enforce this. Like you said, Chase, it might be selectively. So like malfeasant actors maybe are the only ones, but the statute clearly extends to a willful violation, and willful is presumed, like you're presumed to have knowledge of this statute,
Wow.
I think, in their enforcement mechanism.
So unfair.
Yeah, so scary. But company applicants, so I feel like everything got really quiet for a second.
Well, no.
We're contemplating.
Yes. So the applicant, who is that?
So a company applicant is an individual who directly files or is primarily responsible for the filing of the document that creates or registers the company. So the person who files a beneficial ownership, the person who formed the entity, and the person who filed the beneficial ownership report, essentially.
And they're liable.
So that would be for new entities. So say I'm setting up a new entity and someone directed me to do that. Both people are considered the company applicant, is what you're saying.
That's my understanding of
Okay.
it, yes.
But if it's an existing entity, who's the company applicant when there is a change of BOI information?
The person who's inputting the updated.
So there,
BOI.
it doesn't matter that you formed the entity. That kind of thing is old and cold. It's now just who's now actually inputting the information for the report.
Mhm.
Not the person who directed them to do that. Or are you saying that if I'm a supervisor telling my paralegal to file the report, does that make both of us?
That is where, so there's the two parts. There's the individual who's clicking the button
Right.
saying, okay, we're filing this BOI report. And then there's the person who's directing or controlling the filing. And that's where things get interesting because
That could be a lot of people,
it's
actually.
so incredibly broad.
Yeah.
And always remember, if you get it wrong, you go to jail.
And get fined $10,000.
There's so much stress there. How does FinCEN, and maybe this is out of scope, maybe we don't know, how do they know that it's not fake data being entered by a troll or some sort of a bot or some sort of a bad actor?
That would go into cybersecurity, which I'm definitely not really qualified to talk about.
Yeah, I have heard that there have already been incidences of like Fred Flintstone or something like that being filed as the responsible party. I don't know that they pick it up or flag it. I don't know how we know that that's happened, except for maybe people self-disclosing, hey, I went on and filed Fred Flintstone, one bedrock way, and it didn't kick it back. So they're just taking the information. As far as we can tell, they're not independently validating it.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, artificial intelligence will be doing all this for us soon.
Yeah, that's Yeah.
Loaded question
And now we're
there.
gonna have computers talking to computers and we don't have anything.
Well, they're going to be our Army and our Air Force. So, anyway, back
Yeah.
to
Company applicants.
this alarming 1984 excerpt. But anyway,
So sorry, where were we going? What was the
Well,
next
the
step of the company
applicant is
applicants?
liable.
company applicant.
Yep. Company applicants, the person who's clicking the button
Even
would
if
be
that
liable.
person isn't a control person, if you
Correct.
ask somebody to do it for you, you're asking that person to take on your liability.
Yes.
Jointly and severally with you.
That's pretty real.
Yeah.
Who's gonna do that? Who's gonna do that? I can't ask somebody on my team to do that.
Yeah, but they don't know what they're signing up for.
Oh, you just don't tell
Right.
them. Just lie.
No.
It's omission rather than commission.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's get our transgression straight here.
That makes it so much better. Dad didn't ask if I was drinking last night. I didn't lie to Dad.
So, are you done with company applicant, or is there more fun stuff?
I think that's as fun as we need to get
Okay.
into that part.
So, how does one, once they decide to accept the responsibility to become a company applicant, and we're like stupid silly at this point. We're all laughing about this, but it's obviously very serious stuff.
Well, not because we're scared.
How does one actually do the filing?
So FinCEN has a portal, has a website. I've clicked through it. With some faulty information or just false information, I did not hit submit. It was just to go through the process. But it's actually a reasonably painless process, just going through and giving all your information. It's less painless when you think about the information that you're giving.
Yeah.
But it's pretty simple, and the website provides good instructions for
Are
it.
they asking like you got to create a username and a password?
You can do a FinCEN identifier, which is a whole nother topic, which I need to do a little bit more research into creating. I haven't created one of those yet, but
Meaning once they have your information, you can use that identifier to keep referencing back to that information?
yeah, you can create, well, you have to apply separately for another FinCEN identifier, and then you can file your BOI reports using the FinCEN identifier, and it streamlines the process.
But you don't know if that's automatic, like EIN application where you just get the number that day. They might actually do some processing of the information for FinCEN.
I think it's very quick. I think it's issued. I haven't applied for one myself.
Because like the IRS, you can apply for what they call PTIN,
Mhm.
but it takes some time for them to process it, confirm your social, that it matches your name and that sort of
That
stuff.
sounds like global entry and stuff like that to me too. So if you ever want to actually travel overseas and you don't want to like spend all your time, just use your new global entry ID, which is different from your passport ID, which is now all linked to your face anyway. So maybe I'll just stare at a camera and be able to apply it. That's
Yeah, they could probably do it.
right.
Um,
But that's not creepy at all.
no, to know that you're applying to have a special identifier with Financial Crimes Division of the federal government, Treasury?
Not scary at all.
No.
No big deal. Wow. Holy cow.
So I want to shift some of the discussion to Jeff now that he's had an even, I mean, we've worked with Jeff at our firm to analyze the risk management components of this activity because we do anticipate at Goodspeed and Merrill we're going to have to be somewhat involved in the process. What are some of the risks, the coverable risks and the uncoverable risks associated with this activity, whether it be a professional services firm like ours or an individual running their own business who is deciding to comply on their own motion, on their own volition?
Yeah, well, I've kind of gone down the road with your firm in particular around the risks that you guys are inheriting if you are going to go ahead and provide a value-added service to these business owners and these entities to actually file this on their behalf. It's been an interesting couple of weeks just in researching this. I I don't know that the insurance companies are really ahead of it at this point in time. They're really, in essence, I think, grouping this particular service into many of the other services that you guys provide as legal as legal representatives, whether it be filing, creating business entities, filing, other business transactions, doing things like that. They're really, from an underwriting perspective, kind of throwing this right into there. So when I double checked with your current underwriters, they felt comfortable that this particular service would be encompassed in your current exposure that we are currently covering as a legal, a provider of legal services.
You expressed some concern, though, it seemed, I can't remember if this was on or off during our break, that this is the penalties here are criminal and individual.
Right.
So how does the professional liability, or how does the coverage not just we, but a professional service firm that they typically have, does it extend to that kind of fine and, defense and?
Yeah, it could potentially step into a fine, but obviously when it comes to doing time, there's some
legal defense if you were to want to try
legal defense would be included in that.
So take a non-professional services business and just say it's John, or what do they call it, Joe Plumber, right, from back in the day. He's now doing it under his own business insurance, general liability, or having one of his VPs or something like that, someone he assigns to make sure it's compliant. Is there risk exposure there from a general kind of what businesses usually get? They don't get the professional, liability, the E&O type of stuff. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know of a form that would step into that. Obviously business owners can be fined for a number of different reasons. And a lot of these, even professional forms won't necessarily, step into a fine, like pollution liability, for example, which isn't, necessarily a professional form, but there's, some limitations with regards to coverage for, paying fines due to criminal activity. We do insure stupid in this industry, but we're not here to insure anything that's of criminal nature. Now, in this particular case, we would hope nobody's doing anything intentionally.
Right.
And again, covering just the normal business owner who doesn't have a professional liability exposure. He's just a business owner trying to make sure that his taxes are filed every year, his payroll taxes are paid, and then now put this on top of everything else that we have to do as business owners. I think it's just an inherent risk that we as business owners are going to have to accept, which I don't know this is a great promotion to free enterprise. This is just another reason a lot of business owners are getting out of business, and a lot of reason to not go into business. It's just one more thing. And those are just inherent risks that we assume as business owners. So, while we can transfer risk to insurance companies for a lot of things, this is one of those things that, I don't think we can necessarily transfer risk to.
But certainly looking at cyber policy would be something, that this turns into a little bit of a risk management podcast. People should be doing that anyway, reviewing their cyber coverages to make sure that all known cyber risks are wrapped up, or that the policy limits are high enough. But this seems to be, as much as it is a compliance risk, I think for me, it stands out as a significant cyber risk because of the forced transmittal and retention at some level of PII.
Yeah, that I think is where a lot of the focus will be, or it is already at this point in time. As if you didn't have enough private information that you guys are housing on behalf of your legal clients, this is just going to add to it. So all the more reason for any firms that are offering this type of service, such as Goodspeed and Merrill, to make sure that, yeah, they've certainly anteed up on that coverage, maybe even increasing limits, which we've been looking at here for you guys in particular. But by all means, I think because the business owner is basically filing his own personal information, yeah, that business owner is going to want to make sure that they also have a cyber liability form policy to basically protect their private information.
Yeah. And here's where I'll plug, while we will be involved, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we're certainly not going to leave our clients out there wondering how to comply with this thing. But we are being as proactive as possible to come up with a very secure way to permit clients to control their identities, to control this information that's required, so that it's not necessarily even in our possession. They own it always 100%, and they authorize its transmittal through blockchain. And don't ask me how blockchain works, but I understand from Bitcoin that people put a lot of trust in whatever blockchain is. So that's one of the solutions we're working to develop with a technology company partner. And hopefully, I know there are other service providers out there who facilitate kind of the gathering and workflow, but they have the same level of standards that of security that, the TransUnions and the Equifaxes, who have all been breached in one way, shape, or form. It's still concerning for me to put my information in someone else's hands. And that's what we're trying to avoid with this new solution.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, the portal, I've played around on it a little bit, but I hate to make an assumption that that's a secure portal, and who would be responsible for the information if it was actually breached. It's a government entity. Clearly, they've hopefully put a lot of the checks and balances in place to make sure that that information is protected.
Do they claim it's an encrypted upload?
I don't know.
I think, yeah, I'm not sure. I do know that the CTA, the act itself, does impose actually stricter violations for unauthorized access to the information than messing up the beneficial ownership report. It's to fine up to $250,000 and 5 years imprisonment. So there's at least,
if someone intercepts a transmission
or improperly accesses the information provided through the report.
But I feel so much better.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're going to impose that upon the Russians. It'll be great.
Karl, I've never seen you so feisty. I know.
It really is frustrating.
So I think it's, from a risk management perspective, it's business as usual. I mean, we all should be on hyper alert with regards to, where we're sending information and how we're sending it. I don't think, that hasn't changed for the last 10 years, but, I think make sure that, you're good and shored up on that front. And then, I think, entrusting a third party firm, like Cypress, for example, would be, maybe not a bad idea, along with all the other services that you're providing to our business, yeah, go ahead and file that too while you're at it, right? You're already creating a bunch of new entities on behalf of business owners. And so therefore, hey, we're also going to do this for you as well. I think as a business owner that I'd be willing to pay for that. I'd be willing to transfer that risk.
From our perspective as a service provider, it felt, as we thought through the process, it felt kind of weird for us to say, yeah, we won't even set up the entity for you anymore. You have to set up your own entities, because just the mere act of setting up the entity
makes you a company applicant.
So now we're like, well, we're in it anyway. Come up with a solution here. And we just felt it would be disingenuous to say, we'll provide you all these legal services and advice and counsel, and you need to go set up these 5 entities now. And, it just wouldn't work. And this is part of the problem with the whole concept of this statute at its outset. It ignores the reality of how business is done, I think, in the United States, how much people rely on their advisors, and basically how you're pulling that whole group of people in who may not know exactly how the business is run or operated, or when something changes or that sort of thing. It seems a bit excessive in its breadth and scope. But
Agreed.
Very nice way to put it.
But that's where we're at. And our timeline, again, we've got.
pre-existing entities, pre-2024 entities, we have till 12/31.
Of the calendar year.
Yep.
So pre-existing is a long time.
New entities have 90 days. I'm pretty certain of this. I know the statute originally said 30, only in this year.
Yeah.
And then thereafter 30. And then, but that 90 days does not apply to change of beneficial ownership information. I still believe, maybe I'm wrong on this one, but let's just assume that that's a 30-day time frame. It might also be 90, but either way, don't wait till day whatever. The minute you have change of beneficial ownership information, start working to complete compliance, because
Your buttons on the FinCEN website.
Yeah.
Hope you remember your password.
If there's several owners in a LLC, for example, partnership, do they each have to do it individually? Or is it done on behalf
it's a
of the
single
company?
application that includes all that information. So you,
So you
yes.
can get the personal information from all of your partners as well.
25% or more, or what are they called again? Control.
Or substantial, those who exercise substantial control.
But then you're gonna repeat for each one of these companies.
Correct.
So you got a holding company that owns a couple real estate properties. Each real estate property has a LLC. You're gonna do at least 3 of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because it looks through, does it?
There's well, actually, that's another interesting question, because the calculating as it goes through, that's a whole nother issue in and of itself, how to calculate the ownership percentage through different tiers of entities.
Yeah, that's complicated.
And that's what the FinCEN does.
That's what I
provide some
do.
guidance on that.
I mean,
Yeah.
you guys have seen my structures. They're not like,
This is what you do.
yeah, this is what I do.
Yeah,
So
lucky you.
I didn't know they were after my clients, but clearly they are.
Yeah.
And everybody else. This is such a, I think there'll be so few people who are in the exempt category that it will be shocking. Like I said earlier on in the last episode, they estimate about 33 million filers this year.
That's huge. That's so big.
Either that, or so one of the exemptions is no economic activity in, like, if it's truly a shell that has had no financial transactions pass through it in, I forget the time period, if you can find that real quick.
Yeah.
So if you've set up entities and you just left it there and you haven't been doing anything, those aren't going to be a problem. But it's anything, like I say, the special purpose vehicles that we set up for single family rentals, company structuring that's done for liability isolation.
Inactive entity.
Inactive
Exemption
entity.
number 23.
Oh, it's the 23rd exemption.
How would you know?
It's like the 33rd degree of masonry or something like that.
See if I can make sure I'm on the right one.
It's number 23. It's the Michael Jordan.
There you go. Was that his first number or his second? 45 was his second number, right?
Oh, when he went to,
That's a good
He
question.
came back and he had
23 was
the original.
3, here
I
we
know
go.
you Utah fans want to block that out of your mind, but
So all 6 of these have to apply. So entity had to have been in existence before January 1st, 2020. The entity is not engaged in active business. It's not owned by a foreign person, directly or indirectly. The entity has not experienced any change in ownership in the preceding 12-month period. Entity hasn't sent or received any funds in an amount greater than $1,000 directly or through any financial account. The entity does not otherwise hold any kind or type of assets, whether in the US or abroad, including ownership interest in any corporation, LLC, or similar entity.
So not a broad exemption.
Right.
Anyway, Chase, do you want to give them your direct line? Just kidding. If anybody has any questions, please look up Chase on our website and give him a call.
Well, just remember the resident expert is in quotations and has an asterisk.
But yeah, as for our clients, we are grateful to have Chase on the team so he can answer questions.
Great podcast. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Chase.
Thank you for having me.
Holy cow. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the discussion and the information we shared.
We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful.
We hope you will join us again next time as we explore new areas of interest to our listeners or current issues we believe are important to discuss.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you are notified when future episodes are released, and also share it with a friend that you think would benefit.
If you'd like to meet with a member of the Expert Network team or have a request for a special topic you'd like to have us discuss on the podcast, submit those requests to info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
Thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the professional firms represented, including guests, nor does it constitute legal, investment, accounting, or other advice of a fiduciary nature. The views expressed are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisor services may be provided through A&I Wealth Management. Securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.